I'm 77. I was the first black police officer in my city. I am 77 years old. My name is Officer William Bill Thompson, and I need to tell you something about wearing a badge when the people you're sworn to protect don't trust you, and the people you work with don't want you there. In 1965, I became the first black police officer in Riverside, Ohio, a city of 85,000 people that had never seen a black man in uniform carrying a gun and the authority to use it. They said it would never work. They said the community wouldn't respect me. They said the other officers wouldn't accept me. They said a black man couldn't maintain law and order in a city that was 78% white. They were right about some things and wrong about others. But I wore that badge for 32 years anyway because I believed in something they couldn't understand, that justice doesn't have a color and someone had to prove it. I was born in 1947 in the Hill District of Pittsburgh. My daddy worked in the steel mills and my mama cleaned houses for white families. Growing up in the 1950s, I had a complicated relationship with the police. They weren't our protectors. They were more like an occupying force, treating every young black man like a suspect. I was 17 when two officers stopped me walking home from work, still wearing my grocery store uniform. They said someone had reported a theft nearby, and I fit the description. The description was young black male. They searched me, questioned me, made me stand against their patrol car for 20 minutes with no evidence, no witnesses, and no crime committed. When they finally let me go, one of them said, "Stay out of trouble, boy." That night, I told my daddy what happened, expecting him to be angry. Instead, he sat me down and said, "Son, you can be mad at the system, or you can try to change the system, but you can't do both at the same time. Anger makes you want to tear things down. Change requires you to build things up." "How can I change a system that doesn't want me in it?" I asked. He looked at me and said, "By getting inside it, by proving that you belong there, by showing them that a black man can serve and protect just as well as anyone else." In 1964, after the Civil Rights Act passed, I saw a notice. Riverside, Ohio Police Department seeking qualified candidates. Equal opportunity employer. I drove there on a Saturday morning, filled out an application, and took the written exam. The sergeant who administered the test looked at me like I was from Mars. "You sure you want to do this, son?" he asked. "Police work ain't easy, especially in a city like this." I passed the written exam with the second highest score out of 37 applicants. I passed every test, physical fitness, psychological evaluation, background check. By every objective measure, I was qualified. But qualifying was just the first hurdle. The real test came when I reported for duty on Monday, April 12, 1965. Walking into that police station was like walking into enemy territory. 38 white officers, one black recruit. Chief Peterson introduced me to the day shift. "Gentlemen, this is Officer Thompson. He'll be riding with Officer Martinez for his first month." No applause, no welcome, just silence and stares. Officer Martinez, a Mexican-American who'd faced his own discrimination, pulled me aside. "Thompson," he said, "some of these guys are going to test you. Don't give them a reason to wash you out." "What kind of pressure?" I asked. "The kind where they don't back you up on a call, where they forget to relay information over the radio, where your equipment mysteriously malfunctions at the worst possible time." My first week showed me I wasn't just policing the community, I was defending myself against my own colleagues. Riverside's black community was concentrated in the East End, about 15% of the city. When we responded to calls there, the reception was complicated. Some saw me as a traitor who'd joined the enemy. Others saw me as someone who might finally treat them fairly. Most were just confused. They'd never seen a black police officer. My first arrest was at a bar fight between a white man and a black man. The black man yelled, "You ain't no real cop. You just a house Negro with a badge." The white man demanded the real officer handle his case. I approached both men. "Gentlemen, I'm Officer Thompson. Whether you like it or not, I am a real cop, and I'm going to do my job." You can cooperate or you can go to jail. We arrested both for public intoxication. Equal treatment under the law, regardless of color. It was a small moment, but it felt like a victory. The real test came 3 months later during the summer of 1965. Tensions were rising across the country. The Watts riots had happened in Los Angeles, and cities everywhere were on edge. On a hot Thursday night in July, we got a call about a disturbance at a house party in the East End. When we arrived, about 50 young people were gathered in a backyard. Music was playing, people were dancing and drinking, and neighbors had complained about the noise. My partner that night was Officer Brooks, a 15-year veteran who'd made it clear he didn't think I belonged in uniform. As we approached the party, he pulled me aside. "Thompson," he said, "these are your people. You handle this." It was a test, and we both knew it. If I came down too hard, I'd be seen as the enemy by the black community. If I was too lenient, I'd be seen as incompetent by my fellow officers. There was no right answer. I walked into that backyard, and conversation stopped. Everyone stared at this black man in a police uniform. I found the homeowner, Marcus, and introduced myself. "Marcus," I said, "I'm Officer Thompson. We got a complaint about the noise. Can you help me turn down the music and ask people to keep it down?" Marcus looked at me suspiciously. "You really a cop?" "Yes, sir. I'm here to make sure everyone has a good time safely and the neighbors can get some sleep." He studied my face, then nodded. "All right, I can respect that." He turned down the music. The situation was resolved peacefully, but Brooks wasn't happy. "That's it? You didn't check IDs? You didn't search anyone?" "There was no evidence of illegal activity," I said. "Our job is to keep the peace, not harass citizens who aren't breaking the law." That's when I realized the fundamental difference. He saw it as us versus them. I saw it as service, protection, partnership with the community. Over the years, I developed my own approach. I got to know the people in my neighborhoods. I learned their names, families, concerns. I showed up at community meetings, church gatherings, school events. I tried to be a police officer the community could trust. It wasn't always easy. There were times when I had to arrest people I knew, people whose families I'd met, people who trusted me. There were times when I had to use force, when I had to make decisions that hurt people I cared about. One call that still haunts me was a domestic violence situation. When we arrived, I recognized both people, James and Sarah Williams. I'd been to their house before for noise complaints, and they'd always been respectful, cooperative. But this time was different. James was drunk, angry, violent. Sarah was bleeding from her nose and mouth, and their 2 young children were crying in the corner. James saw me and yelled about how I was a traitor to my own people. "You ain't gonna arrest me," he said. "You ain't gonna take a black man to jail for these white cops." I looked at Sarah, at those scared children, and knew what I had to do. "James, you're under arrest for domestic violence. You have the right to remain silent." He resisted. I had to use force to subdue him, handcuff him, put him in the patrol car while his children watched. It was one of the hardest things I'd ever done, but also one of the most important. Sarah thanked me later. She told me I'd probably saved her life that night, but in the community, there were whispers that I'd been too quick to arrest a black man, that a white officer might have handled it differently. You can't win. No matter what you do, someone thinks you did it wrong. The key is knowing in your heart that you did what was right. By 1968, things were changing. The department had hired 2 more black officers, Charles Washington and Robert Davis. Having allies made a huge difference. We could support each other, compare experiences, and develop strategies for the unique challenges we faced. We also formed relationships with fair white officers who judged us by our work rather than our race. Officers like Martinez, like Sergeant O'Malley, like Detective Morrison, who took me under his wing and taught me investigative techniques. The community was changing too. The civil rights movement had raised awareness about police brutality and discrimination. Departments across the country were under pressure to reform. Chief Peterson retired and was replaced by Chief Williams, who believed in community-oriented policing. Chief Williams made me a detective in 1970, the first black detective in department history. It was a promotion I'd earned through hard work and good cases, but it also made me a target for resentment from officers who thought I'd been promoted because of my race. Being a detective was different from patrol work. I spent more time investigating crimes, interviewing witnesses, building cases for prosecution. I worked everything from burglary to homicide, developing a reputation for being thorough, fair, and effective. The case that defined my career came in 1972. A series of break-ins was terrorizing the East End. Homes were being robbed, families traumatized, and the community was scared. The perpetrator was careful, professional, and seemed to know when families would be away. After 6 weeks of investigation, I identified Tommy Morrison, a young white man who worked for a moving company and targeted black families' homes. When I arrested Morrison, he was shocked to see a black detective. During interrogation, he confessed to 15 burglaries and said, "I figured nobody would really investigate those robberies seriously. I mean, who cares what happens in the East End?" That's why my job mattered. Morrison targeted black families because he thought police wouldn't work as hard for them. I proved him wrong. I worked that case as hard as any case, and I got justice for those families. The case made headlines. Black detective solves crime spree. While I was proud, I was disappointed that my race was more newsworthy than my effectiveness. But it built trust in the black community. People started seeing me not as a black officer or white officer, but as a good officer who would fight for them regardless of color. Over the years, I worked hundreds of cases: drug busts, robbery investigations, homicide cases, fraud schemes. I testified in court, worked with prosecutors, developed informants. I did the job the way it was supposed to be done, with integrity, professionalism, and dedication to justice. I was promoted to sergeant in 1978, lieutenant in 1985, captain in 1990. Each promotion brought new challenges and responsibilities, but also new opportunities to change department culture and the relationship between police and community. As a supervisor, I made it my mission to recruit and develop other minority officers. I wanted the department to reflect the community it served, and I wanted young black and Hispanic officers to have mentors and role models who understood what they were going through. I established community policing programs, neighborhood watch groups, youth outreach initiatives. I believed preventing crime was more important than solving crime, and that police officers should be partners with the community, not adversaries. Not everyone agreed with my approach. There were officers who thought I was too soft, too concerned with political correctness, too willing to coddle criminals. But the results spoke for themselves. Crime rates dropped, community relations improved, citizen complaints declined. One program I'm particularly proud of was the Police Athletic League we started in 1985. We converted an old warehouse into a recreation center where kids could play basketball, get homework help, and interact with officers in a positive environment. I'll never forget the first day we opened. About 30 kids showed up, mostly from the East End, looking suspicious and uncertain. They'd been taught not to trust police, and here we were asking them to come play games with us. One kid, maybe 12 years old, named Marcus, same name as the young man from the house party 20 years earlier, looked at me and said, "Why should we trust you? My daddy says all cops are bad." I sat down with Marcus and the other kids and said, "Your daddy's not wrong to be careful. Some cops have treated black folks badly, but not all cops are the same, just like not all kids are the same." I became a police officer because I wanted to make things better, safer, more fair, give us a chance to show you who we really are. That program ran for 12 years and touched hundreds of kids' lives. Several of those kids grew up to become police officers themselves. Marcus, the skeptical 12-year-old, became a lawyer and now serves as a judge in Riverside. The most challenging period of my career came in the early 1990s. The crack epidemic had devastated urban communities across America, and Riverside wasn't immune. Drug-related violence was spiking, and traditional policing methods weren't working. Many officers wanted to flood the East End with arrests, sweeps, and aggressive tactics. But I'd learned that heavy-handed approaches often made problems worse, not better. Instead, I advocated for a strategy that combined enforcement with prevention and treatment. We worked with community leaders, churches, and social service agencies to identify at-risk youth and connect them with alternatives to street life. We focused our enforcement efforts on major dealers while offering treatment programs to users. Most importantly, we made it clear that we weren't at war with the community. We were partnering with them to fight a common enemy. It wasn't popular with some officers or some community members. The officers thought I was being too soft on criminals. Some community activists thought any police involvement was too much. But gradually the approach worked. Drug-related crime declined and community trust increased. In 1992, when the Rodney King verdict sparked riots nationwide, Riverside remained calm. The relationships we'd built, the trust we'd developed, the programs we'd implemented, they all paid dividends when tensions were highest. I remember that night clearly. Police departments across the country were bracing for violence. But in Riverside, community leaders called me directly. They organized peace rallies, not protests. They worked with us to maintain order, not against us. "Chief Thompson," said Reverend Johnson from Greater Mount Moriah Baptist Church, "we know you're not perfect, and we know the system isn't perfect, but we also know you've tried to do right by this community. Tonight, we're going to stand with you to keep our city safe." That night, I realized that 30 years of bridge building had created something powerful, a police department and community that saw themselves as partners, not enemies. I retired in 1997 after 32 years. My retirement party was attended by hundreds, officers, community leaders, families I'd touched, young officers I'd mentored. Chief Martinez, the same Martinez who'd been my first partner, spoke at the ceremony. Bill Thompson didn't just break barriers, he built bridges. He showed us that a good cop is a good cop, period. Color doesn't matter, character does. The Riverside Police Department I joined had 38 white men. The department I left had 127 officers representing the full diversity of our community. But the work isn't finished. Police departments are still struggling with race, trust, and community relations. Young black men are still being killed in police encounters. Communities of color still don't trust law enforcement. Here's what I learned in 32 years. First, you can't change a system from the outside. You have to get inside it, understand it, then work to make it better. Second, respect is earned, not given. Show up every day. Do your job with integrity, treat everyone fairly. Third, building trust takes years but can be destroyed in minutes. Every interaction is an opportunity to build or destroy relationships. Fourth, the badge doesn't make you better than anyone else. It makes you responsible to everyone else. Finally, change is possible, but it requires courage from both sides. Communities must work with police, and police must change how they work with communities. I was the first black police officer in Riverside, but I wasn't the last. The barriers I helped break have stayed down. But in too many places, those barriers still exist. Young people, especially young black people, the system isn't perfect, but it can be changed. It requires people willing to get inside it, work within it, prove they belong there. Whatever field you enter, whatever system you become part of, you have the power to make it better, more fair, more just, more representative of our society's best values. The badge I wore wasn't just a symbol of authority, it was a symbol of service, commitment, and the promise that justice is possible for everyone. 32 years ago, they said a black man couldn't be a police officer in Riverside, Ohio. I proved them wrong. What are you going to prove them wrong about?